Good evening. It's wonderful to see you here for our Carhart lectureship as we're gathering together. It's wonderful. This morning we had a great time with students at 11 o'clock. We had probably, 65 students? Ish, yeah. And so it was very well attended. We were really pleased. And then after that we had a lunch with our science students. And then coffee with science faculty and education faculty, and then a little downtime, and here we are. So as I think you all know, there's a lot of food left back there, so if you have any ounce of openness in your stomach, please go fill it up back there. There's and it's very good. I always think like heavy hors d'oeuvres, like what's heavy about them? I never have figured that out, but I think that we should, in Spain, they have tapas, right? Which is just the same thing as hors d'oeuvres, but it's easier to spell. And so why don't we just kind of eliminate the word hors d'oeuvres from the English language, and we'll just say we're having tapas, okay? I can spell that. So it's wonderful to have SURF here, the representatives from SURF. We've had a great time with them. And today you'll hear from DEB WOLF, who's the Director of Outreach and Culture for the Sanford Underground Research Facility and lead. And in this role, Deb guides the education, communications, and the Sanford Lab, Homestake Visitor Center. They work together to translate I'm not reading this very well, to translate the world-leading underground science research in helping opportunities for students, teachers, and the general public. In her work as IDEA project manager, she and the team work together to realize the SURF core value of care for others. We embrace and honor the fundamental value of dignity for all individuals. So that's their core value, and it's wonderful to have Deb and Nicole. It was great to have you both, and Ashley, I think she's still here. But Deb, come and speak to us now. Thank you.
How are we doing? Good, awesome. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I'm always grateful to people that give their time to being curious, to learning more, to being involved in their community, to be involved in their state and the kinds of things that are happening in South Dakota. I am very grateful for the invitation and the opportunity to share about the Sanford Underground Research Facility, the pretty cool and amazing things that are happening there. And we are, I'm going to say, unfortunately, one of the best kept secrets in the state. And so we're working to change that narrative a little bit. So we want everyone to know about SURF, what we do at SURF, and the opportunities that exist for students, for educators, for the community, and for, I would say, economic development in our state as well. I want to introduce two individuals that are here with me this evening. One is Nicole Reiner. Nicole is the Education and Outreach Director at SURF, a good friend, and an amazing and committed educator in our state. We are very fortunate to have her and her team leading and supporting STEM education in South Dakota. The other person I want to introduce is my mom. Fran Noteboom is here this evening, and it's Fran's, I won't tell, birthday tomorrow. So everybody, before you leave, wish Fran a happy birthday. So I think it's always important to know who is sharing information with you. So I'm going to give you the short version of Deb, and that is first, that I am not a physicist. So eventually I'm going to talk about dark matter. I'm going to talk about neutrinos, and I'm going to say neutrinoless double beta decay. And that is what I know about it. so that's a little unfair. I am a former classroom teacher. I was in the classroom for over 20 years. I taught high school chemistry and AP chemistry, as well as a variety of other content areas. I also was an instructional coach, so I worked with early career teachers, helped and supported them as they moved from being a novice and excited. Those first few years are critical, incredibly challenging, and we need our educators to continue because like every other profession, you grow and you develop and you gain expertise over time. After working in the Sioux Falls School District, I transitioned and I worked for the state of South Dakota in the Department of Education. I did that for a short time. And then I got the opportunity of a lifetime, and my husband and I were planning on moving to the Black Hills when we retired. We just did so maybe, I don't know when I'm going to retire, but before that. And so 4.5 years ago, we moved out to the hills, and the position that Nicole is now in is the position that I was so fortunate to have for a couple of years as the education director. And now I'm the director for outreach, so that's kind of all of the public outreach, the K-12. We have a visitor center in Lead. Please come visit. I'll show you a picture of it in a little bit. And then also our inclusion, diversity, equity, and access work. I think that's probably more than enough than you need to know. Okay, there we go. So SURF, the Sanford Underground Research Facility, which I will refer to as SURF because Sanford Underground Research Facility is too much to say at one time, is really literally a world-leading underground science facility in Leeds, South Dakota. It exists by being able to leverage the footprint of the Homestake gold mine. So the Homestake gold mine operated in Lead for 125 years. Eventually, the price of gold dropped pretty dramatically. They were actually mining at 8,000 feet below the surface. It was no longer profitable. And in about the year 2000, the Homestake mine closed. And very, very shortly thereafter, there was a group that lobbied to translate that mining footprint into a underground science laboratory. And that is the space today. So I showed this little reel. There were a number of pictures there. I was really proud of my PowerPoint to be able to figure out how to do that. And over the course of the next 30, 40 minutes or so, we'll revisit some of those pictures. But what I want you to do is as I'm sharing with you some things, as you're seeing pictures, as you're thinking about the things that I'm talking about, I want you to think about any challenges that might be associated with doing science in a laboratory that exists in an old gold mine with infrastructure that is legacy infrastructure, science a mile underground, and you want to do world-leading, incredibly difficult, super sensitive science. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head as we go through this. So Nicole showed this picture earlier today, but I think it's one of our better images for trying to understand the footprint of the space that we occupy. So if you look, and I just learned that these do not allow me to point. The pointers don't work. If you look up at the top, pretty far over to the left, you will see that dip. That's the open cut. How many of you have been to Lead and seen the open cut, so most of you know of what I speak. So you know how big that open cut is, ginormous. But then you compare that to this image here. So even the open cut is pretty small compared to the total footprint. What's interesting is you're going to learn a couple mining terms. So we're not going to say tunnel, we're going to say drift. So these are drifts that as they were excavating and as they were mining for gold, and then shafts. So vertical shafts, horizontal drifts. If you look at this, can you see the Homestake gold mine follow the gold? They didn't go straight down, did they? You can actually see them follow that ore body. So at the bottom, at the very, very bottom down there, that's at about 8,000 feet below the surface. So what, a mile and a half-ish underground? Where the majority of our science happens is at the 4850 level. So when we talk about science a mile underground, nearly a mile underground, 4,850 feet below the surface. Let's do this. Let's do a thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways, because I'm a classroom teacher, right? So we got to do this. So, and everybody's going to play along. And the question is, if you were to travel from the surface and you were going to go, you know, a mile and a half underground, do you think that the temperature, now those of you that have been here earlier today, share what you would have said before your the presentation, okay? So do you think, you're going to do this, but nobody show yet, that a mile underground, it's going to be hotter, colder, or about the same as it is on the surface? So I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, show me. Hotter, colder, about the same. 1, 2, 3, show me. Now, I think a couple of things happened, because I have done this, I've asked this question many times, and I would say at least 50% of the people say it gets colder, because many of you have been in caves, and you've been in basements, and it's colder. But a mile and a half underground, you have a whole lot of rock above you, and that rock is actually creating a significant amount of pressure. And we learned this recently, an example of the relationship between pressure and heat. Everybody do this. Put your hands together, squeeze really hard. What do you feel? Can you feel the heat? Yeah, and it's not perfect, but it gives you an idea. So a mile and a half underground, the rock wall temperature would be in the 90s. If you were a miner at 8,000 feet, the rock wall temperature would be in 130, and you were doing really hard physical labor for 12 hours a day in 100% humidity. I kind of can't imagine. One other thing that I'll say about this picture before I transition to the next, a couple of other things. We have we have a challenge with water. And that is every single day, water infiltrates the underground. The open cut, I had always heard it referred to as a giant funnel. Because, you know, it would collect and it would pour in. One of our underground engineers said, no, it's not a funnel, it's a colander. Because there's many, many, many ways, actually, that the water enters the open cut and then works its way underground. So today, our water level is so it's about at roughly at about 6,000 feet. And every single day, we pump water to the surface. We clean that water in our wastewater treatment plant, and we return that water to Gold Run Creek. So that is a constant battle. The last thing I want to point out is if you look at the surface to the two white buildings, those two white buildings are called head frames. And those two head frames actually have within them a giant sheave wheel at the top. They're about 150 feet tall. And across and over that sheave wheel is a rope, because that is the shaft that moves people and things underground. And so I have a picture to show you. So that is the Yates head frame. And if you look, I'm gonna reach over and point again. The head frame is this building. And so at the top of that is where that big wheel is. And right about here is where the cage is. I'll show you that in a minute. But the system that raises and lowers that cage is located over here in this building. And so you can barely see the cables that run from one building to the next building to move people and stuff nearly a mile underground. 6,000 feet of cable. Yes, ma'am.
That far building over there, isn't that the one we go in way over there? When we do a tour, we go up those stairs?
No, this is the administration building. This is where my office is. All of us that sit behind desks are over in this building. Where you went, and you can't really see it, is this building over here.
Okay, that's the one.
Yep, yep, and that's the hoist room. So I forgot to mention, and I apologize. Please stop me. Ask questions. Every time you see something in the picture that you are wondering about, this should be an opportunity for you all to be curious and wonder and get your questions answered. I may very likely say I don't know, but I love those questions. I did notice one other thing that's in this picture, and that is the open cut. So that's up there, and that's where, for quite a while, surface mining was done. So it's one of those things that you go there and you look at the open cut, and you're just, at least for me, I'm just fascinated by all of the rock and the colors, and it's beautiful, and it's not. Because it's also a giant hole in the ground that was created by people. So there's some tension there for me, and I think for many, many people. So I showed this next, and this is to represent both the current underground science space and also the future. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later. But over here, this is the Davis campus. That sits 1 mile beneath that head frame. Okay, so that's the Davis campus. About 3/4 of a mile away is the Ross shaft with a similar head frame. And underneath the Ross is where we are in the process of excavating a whole lot of rock to build what's called LB&F Dune. And so that excavation is in process right now. And then, if you've been following the legislature, we just received the thumbs up from the state for $13 million, and that is to, once the LB&F Dune excavation is done, to create what are called pilot drifts for our next set of underground science laboratory. So this is what we will next excavate, and this is our long-term vision for the next science lab. It'll be a while. But what's exciting about that to me is how forward-thinking we are. And that's not me. That's the whole team. We're not thinking just about, oh, how are we going to operate today? But how are we going to set ourselves up to be successful and have opportunity to host experiments that are going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It's a long path. It's a long path. But I feel like the team, and that is our board of directors, our leadership team, are thinking really strategically about that. So again, those of you that were here earlier, Nicole spoiled all my fun. But that is really, okay, so we've got this science lab, and we're a mile underground, but why? I mean, I told you to think about this early on. All of the challenges associated with doing science a mile underground. Why would we do that? Like, just because it's hard, so we should do it. No, that's not why. And so we ask first graders, we ask fifth graders, high school students, college students, and everybody else why we might want to do science underground. And because I know a lot of you actually know the answer, what I think I'll do instead is tell you what we usually hear. Common answer number one. You're doing super secret stuff. Well, I will tell you, if you ever do have the opportunity to go underground, you get to bring your camera. I'm standing here tonight to tell you why we go underground. We want everybody to know about it. It is not super secret. It's super cool, but it's not super secret. That's the most common response. Common response number two, you're doing really dangerous stuff. So you're doing the really dangerous stuff a mile underground to protect everybody from the surface, on the surface. No, again, working underground in and of itself, we work really hard to be super, super safe. And there are all kinds of policies and procedures to make sure. Joel, at the beginning, when he read my bio, we talked about the core value of care for others. Core value number one is safety. We're working a mile underground. So I will show you the quick animation. And for those of you that were not here this morning, the quick animation that doesn't want to play. Oh, thanks, Nicole. So it is not raining. It is not snowing. It's always snowing. That white stuff that is coming down, cosmic radiation. And so you'll notice what happens on the surface is the surface of our Earth is constantly bombarded by cosmic radiation. But if you then instead work your way a mile underground and put a mile of rock overburden above you, everybody hold your hand out. Go like this. Okay. Pew. 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 About every second or so, a cosmic ray is passing through you. For the most part, they don't do anything. They just pass right through you. They're pretty high energy. If you hold your hand out and then you ride our cage for 12 minutes-ish, and you get to the 4850 level and you were to hold your hand out, okay, do that again, because it's super fun, right? Well, we're going to be here for about 3 months. It's about 10 million times cosmically quieter. So at SURF, we are building detectors to try and detect some of the most elusive particles that exist. And so the detectors that we build are incredibly sensitive to all kinds of interactions. And if we built those detectors and left them on the surface, what they would detect is, just constant noise. And so let's say that a dark matter particle happened to interact, but it was on the surface. We'd never notice it. And so instead, we take our detectors and we move them a mile underground. We remove most of that noise. And so we increase the probability, the likelihood, that we're actually going to see or hear, or whatever word you want to use, those interactions, and that we can detect what we're looking for. What questions do you have at this point? Yes?
How do you transport people between the two campuses?
Oh. Yep, we walk. Now there are some motorized vehicles underground, but for the most part, you hoof it from one to the other. Now, historically, typically, normally, you would take either, if you were going to the Davis campus, you would take the Yates, and if you were going to the Ross campus, you'd take the Ross. But if one or the other is not available and you still need to get underground, you're going to take whichever one, and then you're going to get where you need to go. All right. Yes, oh yes. So we are super, super fortunate for lots of reasons. One, South Dakota and the Black Hills is very seismically inactive. And two, the rock is incredibly, the geologists use the term competent. It's just really, really good, solid, stable rock. And so low seismic activity, super competent rock allows us to be pretty fortunate in where we are, which reduces obviously danger, but it also allows us to build really large caverns, which you're going to see here in a little bit. All right, so these people actually were not going underground, and the way you know that is they're not wearing all the correct PPE. But this was great. So I did a presentation in Sioux Falls to a group of 6th graders, and I used a different picture from the cage. And a young woman raised her hand and she said, "There's no girls in that picture." And she was absolutely right. There were no girls in that picture. And it couldn't find very many pictures where there were girls in the picture. But this one, and so they were all girls, and our executive director, Mike Headley. So this is the picture. This is a picture of the Yates cage. And so again, for those of you that were not here earlier today, this is the way that we access the underground. The cage is about 6 feet wide. It's about 12 feet deep and about 9 feet tall. The maximum capacity, so I'm going to show you. Let's go 6 feet, 12 feet. That's pretty close. Okay. Maximum capacity, 36. There's 35 people in the room. So if we all snuggled up really close, and as Nicole said, you got to have your lunch. You're going to be in your PPE. You got your backpack for your work. It's a tight fit. Now, typically we actually say the cage max is 29, but in an emergency, it is. And I'm just going to say 29 is still pretty cozy. All right, so let's see what it looks like to go a mile underground. So recently, one of our communications team members created a little reel. So it's a 12-minute ride. Actually, this is the raw, so it's about 10 minutes, but he sped it up. So I thought this was kind of fun. And it has music. I don't really love the music, but just bear with me, okay? So the PPE that is required: hard hat, safety glasses, steel-toed boots. Most people are wearing coveralls. You also wear what's called a W65, which is a self-rescuer, which is basically an air scrubber. If there were to be a fire underground, it would scrub the air for about 60 minutes or so. And then whoever the guide is also going to have a gas tester. And so they're going to be, making sure that the oxygen level is right, methane, carbon monoxide, sulfur compound? No, I don't think so. Anyway, it's test for 4 or 5 gases. I could just make something up, couldn't I? I totally could. So there's the Ross ride. It's about 10 minutes over at the Yates. It's a slightly older system, and so that's about a 12 and a half minute ride, but about the same. Oh, not again. So I really liked this juxtaposition. So the picture on the left, I think, is what most people, when they would think about being underground in an old gold mine, what they might imagine. And that is, I think that's actually one of the pump rooms. On the right is in our Class 1000 clean room. So that's part of what's called the Myrana demonstrator experiments. That's the neutrinoless double beta decay experiment. And in that space, you do have to gown up. You are way dirtier than anything else when you walk into that space. And so in a matter of not very much distance, we go from one of the, I would say, fairly dirtiest spaces to one of the cleanest spaces that there are. So what is the science? What is the science that's happening? I'm going to actually start in the lower left with the biology. Now, we don't need to go a mile underground to do the biology experiments. There are, I think, 29 active experiments happening at SURF right now. And astrobiology, extremophiles, trying to learn about how bacteria, biofilms evolve and live and survive in places where your food supply might be pretty limited, or light, low oxygen, really humid, really dry. And so the kinds of critters that are living in those places, and what does the DNA of those organisms look like? And why astrobiology? Ooh, like life somewhere else? Well, maybe, who knows? It is a fairly extreme environment, a mile underground. So let's think deeply. There was a NASA funded experiment related to astrobiology. Lower right. So geology, this is a picture of what was an experiment that just decommissioned recently called Sigma V, trying to understand components of geothermal and how heat can be extracted from the rock using water. So that was an experiment. There's proprietary engineering, so work with Caterpillar in developing and mining technology. And then the real significant area of research, the primary research that's funded through the Department of Energy is that high energy physics. So the search for dark matter, and understanding the nature of neutrinos. And so I thought what I would do is to show you a couple of pictures from our dark matter experiment. So Lux Zeppelin, or LZ, is literally today the world's most sensitive dark matter detector. The data has been collected. They actually released their findings back in July. So what you're seeing in that left-hand picture is the inner cryostat. So that inner cryostat is filled with liquid, well, it's filled with xenon, which is then cooled and liquefied. What the picture on the that left picture is the cryostat as it was being built on the surface at SURF. So that is in the surface lab. And then that multi-million-dollar piece of equipment needed to be transported from the surface lab to the head frame the day after a blizzard, of course. And then it had to be moved underground. Well, it's too big to fit in the cage. So what you gonna do? Well, of course, you're going to hang a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment underneath the cage. You're just going to sling it under the cage, hang it over a 5,000-foot shaft, and just lower it in. It's fine. And it was. It worked. We did. The two pictures at the bottom, the center picture is that inner cryostat, and then the space between what's on the left and those funny looking things on the right, that's currently filled with water, ultra pure water. So that ultra pure water that's in that tank is another one of our, I'm gonna say, shields to filter out additional problem radiation. And then the last picture, this is my favorite, it's really hard to see, but you see the inner cryostat. Then surrounding that are clear acrylic tanks that are filled with a fluid that scintillates or glows when certain kinds of interactions happen between the xenon and the particles that are entering the inner cryostat. And then those funny looking things around the outside are what are called photomultiplier tubes. So they're gonna multiply the light that's seen so that it can be picked up, detected, and recorded. So that's LZ. So the question is, have we seen dark matter yet? Nope. But neither has anybody else, so that's good. And it is a race. It is absolutely a race. There is a dark matter detector in Italy at another underground lab, Gran Sasso. There are a number of other detectors that are looking for different possible kinds of dark matter. We know we have the most sensitive one. We're hopeful. We're going to collect data for several years. The likelihood of an interaction is low, so we're going to have a big tank. We're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to veto out all of the other kinds of interactions and say, oh, there was an interaction. Oh, we know what that is. It's not dark matter. Oh, there's another one. Oh, yeah, we know what that is. The way we will know that it's dark matter is when it isn't something that we know what it is. Question?
You said they published results in July. What did they publish? They hadn't found dark matter.
They published their level of sensitivity. What could they detect? How sensitive? And now there's this graph that shows where the level of sensitivity that they believe they need to be at to actually be able to detect dark matter, or what they believe dark matter is. So the leading theory, are you ready for this? The leading theory for dark matter is that they are made out of weakly interacting massive particles. WIMPs. WIMPs. So at the visitor center, if you'd like to go there, we have shirts that say nerds searching for WIMPs. So I like that shirt. I think that's great. Roger.
Where are the scientists from that are doing the LD?
Oh, that's a great question. So the science that we do, most of the science that we do, involves collaborations of people locally, nationally, and internationally. And so the LZ collaboration is an international collaboration. I know for a fact that there are a number of the researchers that are from Michigan, because Nicole and I got to go there last week and meet some of them. But Roger, I don't have a list. I don't know, but it is a national, international collaboration.
It's like 26 countries.
Yeah, it could be. I know that I have a slide coming up that talks about about LBNF Dune, and that's really massive collaboration. Oh, Nicole, look, I have the same problem that you had. So the other thing that we're searching for is a better understanding of neutrinos, and I was a high school chemistry teacher, and it literally wasn't until I got to surf that I really had any appreciation for neutrinos at all, and yet they are the single most abundant particle of matter that exists. My favorite bullet there is the 1,000 trillion pass through your body every second. They're incredibly hard to detect because, one, really small, duh. Two, not massless, but almost no mass. Three, no charge. So they don't really interact with much of anything. They just pass through all matter and go on their merry way. So a lot of people refer to them as the ghost particle, and yet they're incredibly abundant. And we think they may explain the origins of the universe and why matter exists, but we know very, very little about them. So I include this one because I love this picture. This is the Myrana demonstrator, and the Myrana demonstrator is one of the experiments. It is also just kind of winding down, but its work really was to try to determine whether a particular kind of radioactive decay that is hypothesized actually exists or not. And that is that neutrinoless double beta decay. And so there's a number of hypotheses as to whether that it does, and yet the probability and the half-life of it is so long that we need a detector beyond a level of sensitivity that, and so far it has not been detected, but may explain a whole lot of things about the origins of matter. I'm going to skip the video, but I will tell you if you'd like to see, yes?
What's decaying with the neutrinos? Is that double decay? What's decaying?
So neutrinoless. So in this case, this particular experiment uses germanium. And so there is a particular isotope of germanium that is unstable and radioactively decays. And it's a beta decay. And so if it's a beta decay, it's a proton turning into a neutron. I've got that right, I think. And in that process, most radioactive decays release neutrinos. And there is a hypothesis that there is a neutrinoless double beta decay, so two beta decays, and the fancy part of this is that if a neutrino is its own antineutrino, then you actually wouldn't see neutrinos coming out because they would essentially cancel each other out. That's way beyond what I really know. No, it's germanium. Yes?
So is that container they're in, is that like oxygen-free?
Yes, it's, yeah, so the glove box is purged with nitrogen gas, yeah. All right, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this experiment. So LBNF Dune, that experiment, and I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute, is the largest experiment ever undertaken. It is so large that no one country can support or fund it on their own. So actually closer to 1,500 collaborators from 217 different institutions. 52 of those institutions are non-US institutions, 37 nations, and then CERN is a lead partner in this collaboration. Now, this collaboration to understand neutrinos is on a scale that's hard to imagine. So I do want to show this. This is the excavation that's happening right now at SURF. We are excavating around 870,000 ton of rock to create these caverns. So now we're at the Ross shaft. We're going a mile underground to the 4850 level. We want to build these four large caverns. The footprint by area is equivalent to about 9 soccer fields. So imagine 9 football fields, just all stacked together. This is to scale, so notice the dude. This is one cavern, right? Once fully excavated, it'll be about 7 stories tall. In it, we're going to install the detectors. These detectors actually be filled with liquid argon instead of liquid xenon. So above, because argon is a noble gas, it's a gas at room temperature, we're going to have to have a pretty significant system for cryogenics. We're going to collect a whole lot of data because we're going to have these giant detectors. There's going to be lots of interactions. So we're going to have data acquisition and then all of the electronics. And then this is a mock-up, obviously, of what the detector itself or how it will be built. A prototype was built at CERN, which the pictures that I've seen of it are enormous, and it's only 1/20th of what will finally be here. The neutrinos that we're studying will come from Fermilab. Now, Fermilab is located in Batavia, Illinois, so right outside of Chicago. And what they're going to do is they're going to generate neutrinos, and they're going to just send them through the Earth. Sure, just through the Earth, 800 miles, to our detectors at Sanford Lab. That journey from Fermilab to SURF will take about half a millisecond. So it's a quick trip. And so we are excavating the space right now. That's the excavation. That's in process. So that is the full width of the North Cavern. And we're just over, I believe, halfway down in excavation. So they do excavate from top down. I'll show you this picture. So Nicole showed this one as well. So this is the world's largest rock bolter. So we talked earlier about the fact that the rock is very competent. However, we're excavating, right? And so the rock on the edges has had some trauma to it, right? It's been excavated, it's been blown up. And so the way that we create that safety is to install ground support. And so we install these giant bolts which literally attach the outer rock to the more competent rock deeper in, and it just like hugs it all together. It just pulls it up and hugs it. And then we add wire mesh all the way around. And then we spray shotcrete, kind of a liquid cement. And that is the ground support to create that space. So that's an interesting question. And so, you know, when they were building the Davis campus for the dark matter detector, we have one of the spaces underground is low background counting. So actually counting the radioactivity of all of the stuff that we install in the underground space so that we characterize it, so we know how radioactive is this stuff. We don't want to use this. Let's try using this instead. So that we know the radioactivity of the electronics that are installed. Like all of that has to be understood. So does it get in the way? Sometimes. And I do know that there was, and I don't really know the full story, but some of the shotcrete that was used early on contained, you know, a typically radioactive particle of something. Not radioactive like, oh my gosh, you know, but radioactive enough that it was problematic. I mean, a banana in the clean room is a problem because bananas containing radioactive potassium. Did you all know that? Yeah. Did you know how radioactive y'all are? I'm not, but the rest of you. So, big giant piece of equipment underground, right? And again, as Nicole said earlier, how does that get underground? It's got to go down the Ross or the Yates, 6 by 9 by 12. So that looks bigger than that. What do you got to do? Your Legos, take it apart on the surface. Some of those parts you can't just take apart, so you actually have to cut them apart. And then when you get them underground, then you got to put everything back together. So commissioning and decommissioning is a big, big, big part of the process. So remember I talked about LZ slinging it underneath? This is a mucker, and this is slinging a mucker underneath the cage. So they raise the cage above the entrance level. They have people and crews that are well trained in this process. They sling it underground or underneath the cage and then slowly lower it. So all of this is expensive, no question. Absolutely. But one of the things that we want to make sure that people know about is the fact that even though the state of South Dakota has invested $62 million, that $62 million on the part of the state has really resulted in nearly $1 billion in federal and private monies. So a 15 times return on on investment. If we're talking just fiscally, if we're talking just monetarily, we did an economic impact study, and between the years 2020 and 2029, the economic impact for LBNF Dune, the project that we're working on right now, will have a nearly $2 billion economic impact to the state of South Dakota. We employ about 200 employees through the SDSDA, the South Dakota Science and Technology Authority, that oversees SURF, but another about 200 in partners and contractors, et cetera. And this whole process for LBNF Dune, like it's excavation for X number of years, it's installation for Y number of years, and then it is data collection for Z number of years. That's a 30-ish year commitment on the part of the Department of Energy. So we're going to be around for a while, and that is also why that long-term planning is really important, and thinking about how do we position ourselves for the next experiments. Yes? Thank you for the shout out. So economic impact, But in addition to economic impact, we want to impact the state in other ways. So as I mentioned, the Sanford Lab Homestake Visitor Center, we acquired it a year ago. Please come visit us there. That's the front door for SURF. And it also talks about the mining past, the past history of the sacredness of the Black Hills to the Lakota people and other tribes. And then it also tells the story of today and hopes to inspire the future. Lastly, I will also briefly mention, so I'm going to digress because earlier this evening, Nicole and I were having a conversation, and I said, hey, I looked at the clock when it was like 10:02, and you just got into the education slides. Well, I'm at 3:02, and I just got to the education slides, so she did better than I did. But our education and outreach team does an amazing job. They interact with about 20,000 students, 15 to 20,000 students every year. They do presentations in classrooms. We have students come for field trips. They provide curriculum and resources for teachers. They provide professional development for educators. We provide that career exploration and development through a program called the Davis Bacall Scholars, through our summer internships, through working with pre-service teachers at the universities. They do some pretty amazing work. Lastly, I'll mention our foundation. And everything that we do for public outreach and for outreach and education, there is no charge. When we do professional development for teachers, we actually pay them to attend. We want them to be seen as the professionals that they are. They're at work, they're learning. And we have big plans for what's next. And so a couple of years ago, we stood up a foundation to help support those efforts, because although we're funded by the Department of Energy, and there is money for things like education and outreach, it doesn't allow us to envision the bold things that we really want to do. And so we do have a foundation, and we are just about to launch the Institute for Underground Science at SURF, which is really about bringing that global scientific community together, to learn together, to be inspired together, to interact with educators, to really think about the big questions that are left to be asked. So I know I'm at the end of my time, but anybody that wants to hang out and either ask questions or share things, I'm happy to take any additional questions. But thank you for being a really attentive audience. I love the head nodders in the room. It's very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, Deb. That was excellent. We've had a great time, and we appreciate the money that comes from the Carhart family to support this, so our appreciation there. And the next McGovern Center-related event is going to be on April 13. We're going to have a debate here in this room on the topic, should public schools teach critical race theory? So that's going to be our topic, and so I want to urge you to consider coming out for that debate. We regularly hold public debates on issues of cultural difference, so want to put that on your calendar. So that's April 13 at 7 o'clock right here. So thank you for coming this evening, and have a good night.